So, what do the fossils actually tell us about evolution? The most pronounced explosion of new life forms took place in the Cambrian period, almost 600 million years ago. The basic body plans that appeared in the Cambrian period serve by and large as the blueprints for these seen today. Furthermore, this enormous variety of creatures appeared suddenly, without any sign in the fossil record of how they may have evolved from more primitive creatures. Did they all appear as suddenly as the fossil record suggests, or have we simply failed to find the rocks that might contain the earlier fossils? Over the decades, evolutionary theorists, beginning with Charles Darwin, have tried to argue that the appearance of multicelled animals during the Cambrian merely seemed sudden and in fact had been preceded by a lengthy period of evolution for which the geological record was missing. However, this explanation now seems increasingly unsatisfactory. Since 1987, major new Cambrian sites have been found in Greenland, China, Siberia and Namibia. These show that this period of biological innovation occurred at virtually the same instant in geological time all around the world. In fact, we now have over 50 individual Cambrian fossil localities, some of them shown as dots on this map. The clear pattern of sudden appearances in the fossil record has led to contrasting theories on how the evolution process works. These theories are explained in Stephen Gould's 1,400-page book, The Structure of Evolutionary Theory. On the one hand, we have the classical Darwinian view that just as species are formed by a slow accumulation of very small genetic differences acted upon by natural environmental selection over considerable periods of time, in like manner, much larger differences between invertebrates and vertebrates, between fishes and reptiles, or between reptiles and mammals, all arose by a similar slow accumulation of small differences. This theory is referred to as gradualism. A contrasting theory is called punctuated evolution, proposed by scientists such as Stephen Gould. This proposes that most species arise suddenly and then enter stasis or equilibrium, in which they remain relatively unchanged for millions of years. In geological timescales, these sudden appearances could possibly have involved thousands of years, or they may have taken place even more rapidly. Such shorter periods are almost insignificant in geological timescales and so may not have been recorded in the fossil record. The genetic differences between species within a family of animals is really quite small. For instance, all birds have the same number of genes. Small changes in the arrangement of these genes, or DNA base pairs or letters within these genes, determine the differences between types of sparrow, or between a sparrow and a duck, or an eagle and an ostrich. However, when we consider differences between a jellyfish and a crayfish, or a crayfish and a fish, or a fish and a reptile, or a reptile and a mammal, then the changes in number of genes or arrangement of base pairs within genes is substantial. In fact, each higher life form has more genes or more genetic material than the simpler life form. Also, the number of base pairs within genes varies between major groups. For example, man has 1,000 times more genetic material in each of his cells than has a single-cell bacterium. In man, the genetic material represents 3.1 billion letters of the genetic alphabet. As mentioned earlier, this is equivalent to the information in 200 telephone directories, each 500 pages long. The total length of coiled-up DNA in a cell of the bacterium E. coli is 1 millimeter, while in each of our cells it is 1.5 meters. It is amazing that 1.5 meters of DNA can be so tightly curled up that it can fit into a single cell of our body, so small that it can only be seen with a microscope. Textbooks on biology note that the amount of DNA found in the cells of living things is roughly proportional to the complexity of the organism. When we consider one species changing slowly into another species, this does not involve an increase in the amount of DNA. It means a resorting of base pair sequences in the existing DNA. We see that inherent within the structure of DNA is an ability to vary slightly between individual animals of the same species. We have been told by evolution theory that development of a new species from an existing one normally takes considerable time. We are therefore entitled to expect that this process of slow change will be clearly seen in the fossil record with regard to the much bigger changes in complexity of life forms. In other words, we should see a vast number of transition fossils between major advances in life complexity. However, we actually find very few fossils that appear to represent intermediaries between major groups. One possible example is the Archaeopteryx bird that has some features similar to reptiles. However, we have not found detailed step-by-step transitions between reptiles and birds, although we have found fossil reptiles that had feather-like coverings on their bodies. The Archaeopteryx birds had feathers like modern birds, but also had teeth like reptilian teeth, and no modern bird species have teeth. The fact that we have not found a vast array of intermediate fossils cries out to us that the classical understanding of evolution does not fit the facts revealed by the fossils. However, this classical understanding of evolution is still taught. This is partly because it always takes time for new discoveries to filter down and change biological textbooks. The overall evidence from the fossils strongly indicates the truth already mentioned, that new species and new groups of creatures appeared suddenly during the long ages of life's journey on planet Earth. Furthermore, the most usual pattern is for each new species to then survive practically unchanged throughout millions of years of their existence. For instance, bats appeared suddenly in the fossil record about 50 million years ago. When they appeared, they were in many different species. However, the oldest fossil bats look remarkably like modern ones, each having wings formed from membranes stretched between long fingers and ear structures designed for echolocation. No fossil of an animal intermediate between bats and their non-flying mammal ancestors have been found. We have found many early mammal fossils and many bat fossils, so why have we not found the even greater number of theoretical intermediates? Another example is the coelacanth fish. This appeared in fossils from 360 million years ago and seemed to have become extinct about 80 million years ago. However, it was discovered alive and unchanged in 1938 off the South African coast. Furthermore, prior to discovery of the living coelacanth, some biologists had suggested that it was an intermediate between sea and land creatures due to its extended fins that looked rather like primitive legs. Discovery of these living fossils showed that earlier speculation about this being a missing link were incorrect. This scenario appears to be repeating itself. A recently discovered fossil fish has fins looking more like legs than any previous fossil find. This fossil, named Tiktaalik rosea, certainly looks more like an intermediary stage between fish and amphibians than any previous fossil. However, many people have missed the point. According to classical evolutionary theory, the change from fish to amphibians was achieved by a long process of very slight changes taking place over long timescales. We find a vast array of fossil fishes and a vast array of fossil amphibians. So why do we not find an even vaster array of stages between these two groups? Another recent find is that of a lemur-like creature that lived 47 million years back and has some features that suggest it could be an ancestor of higher primates such as mankind. The fossil has been nicknamed Ida and scientifically is known as Darwinius massillae, since it has been named during the 200th anniversary of Darwin's theory of evolution. The discovery of this fossil was given newspaper headlines such as "New Fossil Proves Evolution" and "Missing Link in Human Evolution." The BBC hailed it as "Scientists Hail Stunning Fossil." The article noted that this fossil was claimed to be a missing link between today's higher primates, monkeys, apes and humans, and more distant relatives. However, New Scientist Journal of 30th May 2009 contains an article that points out that this fossil is definitely not a missing link. The article is headed, "A Fine Fossil, but a Missing Link She's Not." The article notes that the popular press immediately hailed the specimen as a missing link in human evolution. Some called it the eighth wonder of the world. In fact, Ida is the first known member of a new genus and species, but is not on the theoretical line leading to man. Furthermore, this media hype helps illustrate a major problem, namely that there is often a large gap between scientific discovery and its correct interpretation. It also highlights that some people, including some scientists, seem desperate to prove that their understanding of evolution is correct. Unfortunately, the press now keeps silent about Ida not being a missing link. As a result, we can be certain that vast numbers of people will continue to believe that this was a missing link. We must also ask how the discovery of individual fossils can prove anything. If, as we have been repeatedly told by many biologists, that evolution advances by numerous small steps, then we would expect to find vast numbers of intermediate fossils. In addition, we need to remember that existing life forms show some amazing examples of animals with features that could suggest that they are intermediate between widely separated families of creatures. For instance, the duck-billed platypus from Australia. This is a warm-blooded mammal with fur, has webbed feet, lays eggs like a bird, and has a duck-like bill. Are we to suggest that the duck-billed platypus is a survivor from a mammalian ancestor that was on the family tree leading to birds? Or does it perhaps suggest that mammals arose from birds? Both these ideas are not seriously proposed by evolutionary biologists. The study of birds strongly suggests that they are most closely related to extinct dinosaurs. In other words, when an animal has some features similar to another group of animals, it does not necessarily follow that it is a missing link between the two groups. The only fossil sequences that show stages in evolution are those where speciation has occurred on one level of genetic complexity. For instance, stages in the evolution of modern horses from small ancestral forms. This sequence represents an example of evolution producing minor changes within the DNA. It does not represent any increase in DNA or any increased complexity. To my mind, having accepted the evidence for sudden appearance of new life forms and having accepted that evolutionary changes do occur within species, often leading to new species, the most important and fundamental question still remains: what is the mechanism by which one level of genetic complexity can lead to far greater genetic complexity without leaving any evidence in the fossils? This question has not, to my mind, been satisfactorily answered in major books on biology. Scientific literature has no truly satisfactory explanation of how an increase in genetic material can come about. It has been suggested that genes can sometimes duplicate themselves, followed by the modification of one copy into a new role. From studies of the genetic makeup of related organisms, it is possible to speculate that this may have been the path followed. However, what initiates this transition and how is it guided into a new and viable function? Another study is of so-called Hox genes that might trigger radically different expression of existing genes. This could lead to sudden changes in body shape or form and function. Again, such changes might in time prove to be major ingredients of speciation, but not of increased genetic complexity. Another suggested way that the total genetic material might be increased is by the inclusion of so-called retroviruses into cells through disease or other accident. The genetic material from these would initially remain there as so-called junk DNA, but theoretically might later acquire a function due to mutations over a period of time. On the other hand, any sudden inclusion of foreign genetic material is far more likely to fatally disrupt the complex functions of the invaded cell. Clearly, explanations for increased genetic complexity remain the subject of much speculation at this stage. Whatever future research may reveal, it is nevertheless clear that the evolution of life and its development into the vast number of fascinating life forms is a complex and intricate study, much of which remains to be explained.